Hello, my name is Sarah Davachi, and you are watching the If Ever You're Listening podcast.
Sarah Davachi is one of the preeminent minimalist and electroacoustic composers of her time. For decades, she's released captivating albums that challenge our understanding of historic instruments and advance our knowledge of timbre and resonance. I was drawn in from 2017 after hearing her project All My Circles Run. Soon after, I saw her live in Brooklyn and have been following her career ever since. As the years passed, Sarah's music became more expansive and collaborative. She's composed pieces performed by orchestras such as the BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra and the Los Angeles Philharmonic. She's released collab albums with groups like Quatuor Bozzini. She's been commissioned by iconic museums like the Museum of Modern Art to create compositions for their exhibitions and programs. Despite these additional cooks in the kitchen, Sarah's music has never shifted from its original core sound and still provides a meditative ambiance for those willing to give it a close, intentional listen. In our conversation today, we covered her illustrious career from her early days at the National Music Center in Calgary to pursuing a PhD in musicology at UCLA. We also explore her thoughts on concepts such as organology, resonance, timbre, sustained notes, and voice. Sarah is one of the most brilliant and thoughtful musicians out there, so buckle up, as I'm sure you're in for a treat and will learn something new from our chat. Enjoy. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the If Ever You're Listening podcast. I'm your host, Stanley C. And today we have a very special guest, the prolific composer extraordinaire, Sarah Davachi. Thank you so much, Sarah, for coming to the podcast today. Happy to speak with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So, for the listener, if you're not familiar with her, after hearing the intro where I discuss her music, where I kind of started with her albums was in 2017 with All My Circles Run, an extraordinary project that I'm excited to talk about. But I want to first hear about where you started with music, kind of as a young person. Where did your relationship with music start, and when did you learn that you wanted to create music? Kind of that transition from being a listener to then being a maker of music is different timing for every artist.
hmm Yeah. Well, so I grew up playing classical piano, I guess is like how I got into it. My parents put me into piano lessons when I was really young, and I did it up until I was like 18 or 19, something like that. And it was probably around that same time when I started realizing that I didn't like certain things about that world. Like I didn't like doing recitals and exams, and I didn't like performing live was the thing, because I didn't like the pressure of like you have to practice until it's perfect. You have to memorize everything. If you make a mistake, everything's messed up, you know. That just to me that was antithetical to what like the point of making music was. It's like not to play it perfectly and make no mistakes. So I just started feeling a problem there. This is also kind of a weird story, but when I was 13, I accidentally sliced part of this finger. I sliced down here holding a metal tape measure. Somebody pulled the other side of it. So this tendon I actually can't bend on my own. Like I can't do that. So that also kind of put a dent in doing anything professional with playing the piano. So yeah, but I think I started feeling like it wasn't the right thing for me, yeah, around the age of like 18 or so. And that's when I started thinking more about like sound itself. And I remember I've mentioned this a few times before, but I the two things that I used to like playing were Bach and Chopin. Those were my favorite things to practice. And with Chopin, I remember, I'd be playing something and get to like a chord at the end of a phrase or something. And I remember thinking there was such like a beautiful chord or such like a beautiful moment, and I just wanted to hear it happening. I just wanted to hear it keep going. But on a piano, of course, you play it and then it just kind of dies out. So I remember having that first instinct of like, oh, I just want to hear this sound, but it's going away too quickly. I'm not hearing it for long enough. And I think that's when I started thinking about like, well, maybe I can take that into my own hands and make that sound happen. So that kind of transition of like, I don't really care about performing music anymore. I just want to like make the kind of music that I want to hear. Um, so yeah, that was, I guess, like the beginning of it. And then everything that I did after that was just sort of searching for those moments of like when I could take it into my own control of like, this is the sound that I want to hear, and this is how I can make it happen.
Very fascinating. Here is where, even under my research, I was struggling to figure out the through line. So help me learn kind of through your life
Sure.
what came first, the chicken or the egg? Because there's Mills College where you're studying electronic music and recording media. But you also have experience in research. Are you making music this entire time, or is it coming post kind of studying how to create these sounds and having mentors and influences and then creating, or is it all happening at the same time?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was, I guess, kind of happening. I mean, to me, I don't know, I guess to me there it does feel like there are certain steps that
Mhm.
happened, but it was kind of all happening around the same time, I would say. Like one thing in particular, that I don't know why everything came together at this moment, but when I was 20, I was doing my bachelor's degree in philosophy, but at that point I decided I wanted to do a minor in music. I wanted to study music in a formal way, composition, and I started working with electroacoustic composition. So that happened that year. And then I also got this job at this musical instrument museum in my hometown in Calgary, in Canada. And those two things just kind of happening at the same time, I don't know, it just felt like that really opened everything. So yeah, I was doing this job, I was studying music, um, and Mills came a few years later in that timeline. But I was still working at the job. It was, yeah, I think at that point, everything just sort of started blending together. It was happening all at the same time.
Across several of your albums, there's an emphasis on resonance and timbre, specifically around a specific instrument or sometimes a specific note. I wanted to learn in the historical instruments for the listener, if you're not familiar, sometimes it'll be from like hundreds of years ago or from different countries. And I wanted to hear from your perspective, what have you learned about kind of timbre and sound through these albums? I my like through my introduction of All My Circles Run, you're picking like specific instruments and doing this, or on August harp, and it comes up throughout a lot of your projects. But from what are you learning about kind of timbre and dynamics and acoustics from those albums that we like the maybe the average listener doesn't understand from pop music or mainstream music?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, and that's kind of that's a good segue into my PhD because that's basically what my PhD topic was. Yeah, so there's a lot I think that I could say about that, but I mean, I think the job that I mentioned at the Musical Instrument Museum, that was really formative for me, understanding that like when you think of a particular instrument, like if you think of a piano, you might be able to imagine what a piano sounds like. But when you're actually playing it, when you're hearing it happening in that moment, in the space, whatever, there's a particular kind of quality to that timbre that comes out at that moment. And if you go to play a different piano, it's going to be different because that piano is different. If you go and play it in a different space, it's going to be different because that space is different. If you're playing it the next day, it's going to sound different because you're in a different place mentally or whatever. So I think that like hyper particularity of the sound is one thing that I really started to understand and started to think about creatively. And I think that's something that gets really overlooked. Like I said, like when you think of a piano, it's like, oh yeah, piano sounds like a piano or whatever. And people forget that there's so much nuance that can happen, that you can really focus on, and that can be quite meaningful if you're able to hear it.
Are there specific venues? I'm blanking on where I saw, like, what was the specific venue I saw, if it was a church
I
or
was
if
trying to, yeah, I think it was the Park Church Co-op in
yeah,
2000. That was
that
probably
sounds right. Yes.
it.
And that felt conducive to the sound because it had great acoustics, it was wide open. Um, are there specific venues that you prefer versus others when you're playing your music, or if you're having like an orchestra or a philharmonic
Yeah.
play it?
Yeah, I mean yeah, it really depends and I think about this a lot because it changes a lot and I don't know that there's like sometimes it feels like there's a bit of like a weird alchemy that happens with concerts where it's like everything just comes together in the right way, but you don't really understand why. And sometimes you'll have a venue that, like, on paper looks like it would be good, but just something isn't clicking properly and it's just not working. So, yeah, it really, I think it changes a lot. But I don't know, they're each different. I mean, generally speaking, like, I like playing in churches because it works well acoustically and sort of the vibe, I guess, is set for that kind of listening properly. And then concert halls, they're nice too, but sometimes because of the acoustics, like the acoustics of a concert hall are not meant to be super reverberant. So sometimes that can make certain pieces that I want to present there feel a little dead or something, like to feel like they're not really doing what I need them to do. And it can change quite a lot. And also just like the size of a venue. And as a performer, I think that's something that's sort of a unique responsibility that you have is to understand like, okay, this is a big space. I'm in charge of kind of getting everybody into that place where they can listen. And sometimes that's a difficult task. And other times, if you're playing in like a club or something like that, the energy is usually more like people are talking and people are, coming and going and that can be tricky too. And yeah, as the performer, it's kind of in your hands to be able to control that in some way. So yeah, I don't know, it changes a lot. And like I said, sometimes you go into somewhere that you're like, oh, this is going to sound horrible. This is going to be horrible. And for whatever reason, it just everything comes together and it's perfect. And some of the like my favorite shows are ones that were like very unassuming. And then again, there are other ones that you're like, oh, this is going to be great. And for whatever reason, it just doesn't happen.
Before we started, I was telling Sarah that when I went to see her in 2018 in Brooklyn, I brought a friend who was unfamiliar with their music, and he was like, "I'm not hearing anything change. It's just the same note for a long period of time." And I was like, "No, no, no. You have to like be quiet, listen closely. It's not background music. It's actually like front word music." But it just didn't connect. And later on, late in different projects, I think helped him. I think when he started hearing like your voice and other albums that came out, but like in Cantus, I think. But for you, I think something really interesting when it comes to music like this, a lot of people do consider it background music or consider it something that you could listen to passively. But I've heard you speak about how you actually want the listener to listen more intently to the music. Kind of what do you want the listener to be listening for, and what kind of emotional impact do you want the music to have?
Yeah, it's a good question because it is like the bane of my existence as a musician is like, and I think about it a lot because, like I said, it definitely not to single out your friend because I've heard this a lot. I hear this a lot from people where they're like, it's just one note. I don't get it. Nothing's happening. And I think earlier it used to bother me more that people didn't weren't able to hear it, and I would get self-conscious and double or second guess myself about it of like maybe it is just one note, like maybe I'm not doing anything interesting. But I think over time I've learned to accept that like people are either gonna get it or they're not. I think with this kind of music, I mean, it is like pretty divisive music. And either you just hear those things or you just don't for whatever reason. And I'm sure there's a lot of things and other types of music that I don't hear, I don't get, and I'm just not going to. And I think maybe with this kind of music, it is more of like a skill that I suppose you could develop and like train yourself to be able to listen in a different way, but only if you want to hear those things, to hear it that way. So for me, I don't know, that removes part of it where I feel like I've stopped trying to convince everybody, like you can't please everybody, so I'm just focusing on the people who do want to hear it. But really for me, I don't know, it's also a bit complicated because I have certain things in the music that for me need to be there that I'm doing it for specific reasons of what I want to get out of it. but I also don't like the idea of like imposing something emotional onto the audience, and I don't even think that's like really possible. I think you can try, but people are just going to get what they're going to get. They're going to hear what they need to hear out of it, which I think is good. So I mean, the way I kind of think of it is as the composer, the performer, I almost think of it in like architectural terms, where like I'm trying to create a space for something to happen. Whatever that something is outside of my control, but I'm creating that setting and the what it feels like and what it looks like and the things that people can interact with in order for those things to happen. Um, so yeah, I mean, I guess like I expect of my audiences, I suppose, to be able to, yeah, to listen in a way that goes beyond the surface level of just saying like, yeah, okay, so there's, even if there's one note happening, there's so much stuff that happens within that. You know, it's similar to like if you look at a Rothko painting or something, it's like, yes, it's a block of red, but like if you look at the red, it's incredibly fascinating. There's a lot going on. And again, maybe you're going to see it, maybe you're not, you know, like I don't know that there's much you can do if people just don't see that. Um but yeah, I just want people to be able to really like hear things. And I think, you know, you can train yourself to do it. Like if you are vacuuming one day or something, you could tell this to your friend maybe. Just like stop vacuuming and just stand there, let the vacuum run for like 30 seconds and just listen to it. It's a really interesting sound and there's a lot going on inside of it, you know. And if they can't hear it, they can't hear it.
I love that. I really like that example. I also think of like when it's raining and you
Hmm.
kind of hear the rain. There's so much going on with the rain and
Yeah.
oh, that's so cool. Okay. I'm gonna message him. For speaking of people who get it, one of the things that I do love about your music is, especially in more recent years, I feel like there's been this great elevation of both kind of where the music is being held, but also like who you're collaborating with. I'm seeing collaborations with the Los Angeles Philharmonic, Quatuor Bozzini, the BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra, like, and that's just a small sample. There's many collaborators, but I wanted to hear from your perspective. What do you look for in a collaboration? I'm sure not everybody who reaches out or people that you're interested in reaching out, the relationship isn't always there. So what do you want out of a collaboration, and kind of what do you seek when people reach out to come perform your work that you've composed?
Yeah, I mean, that also like changes a lot. Like there isn't, I guess, one specific way that it kind of happens. I mean, um, if I'm reaching out to people to record or play on a record or play a show or something with me, I think the baseline has to be that there are people who get it, because that's actually not always the case, especially in live performances. You know, I've not to everybody I've played with is they're excellent musicians. Not to like put anybody down, of course, but sometimes, you know, in certain situations, you're playing in a city where you like don't know anybody, or it's just certain circumstances where you just kind of have to find whoever's available. Sometimes you get musicians who just aren't used to playing this kind of music. They don't understand it. They don't maybe even like it. But it's kind of like a job that they're doing. You know, you get that sort of vibe. And I think it just, yeah, sometimes I get confused when I encounter stuff like that because I'm like, how can you not hear this? How can you not understand this? You know, and it kind of goes back to that thing where I'm like, I don't get why you don't get this. But you just have to figure out how to communicate what you need to get through the performance or whatever to make it work. Other times, you know, there are musicians where maybe they don't have a lot of experience playing this kind of music, but you know that they can hear it and you kind of come to that place together where they understand it and you're kind of hearing it for the first time again through their ears, which is a really nice experience. But yeah, most of the time, the people that I reach out to are people that I already know have an interest in this kind of music. And even just beyond like the being able to hear it part, I think a lot of people underestimate how difficult it is to play this kind of music, you know, especially with it's like, well, it's only one note. I mean, even just playing one note, theoretically, if you're playing one note for like 10 minutes, like that's hard actually to play it at a certain dynamic with a certain kind of tone that you're holding and like holding that almost the dramaturgy of the performance as well. There's a certain kind of endurance to it and playing, hour-long pieces that are really quiet, really delicate, that involve specific tuning. It's not easy. So yeah, finding musicians who are like good at doing it, who you don't really have to explain what you need, or they just get it. Those are the kinds of musicians that I seek out, that I like to work with a lot. And I think it's sort of symbiotic. The people who reach out to me are people who have heard my music and, like that challenge, I guess, of playing like really brutal, slow, quiet music.
It's the believers. It's the once
Yeah.
the believers. I this might be a question I ask afterwards. I was like, I want to hear who are the other Sarah Davachi? Because you are so singular in my mind at the music I listen to. I can't find many artists similar to you. I may ask that question at the end. Like, who do you recommend for people who are
Yeah.
interested in that sound, that minimalism
Yeah.
sound? But I want to talk more about your music, and there's a new album coming, so we're gonna cover that first. But before I get to the new album, which is connected to this question about vocals, one of the sounds that we don't hear frequently in your music is vocals from singers. And then even rarer is your vocals, which I'm always interested in hearing. We got a piece of that in Cantus Descant. And there's been vocals in in other projects here and there from Two Sisters, The Head Is Formed, in the Careers Choir, and also on the new album, The
Yeah.
Will of Tongues, on especially on this new single. But I want to hear about your relationship. Talk to me about your intentionality, I should say, around voice and when you decide to use it versus your main focus, which is the subtleties and dynamics of specific instruments.
Yeah, I guess it's a good question. I mean, I think with Cantus Descant, I think I don't know, I was going through something. I was like, I need some songs. I need to just like write a song,
Mhm.
And I did that, and it was really fun, and I like doing it. I think it's just, I don't know, it's not where my head is at as a priority right now. It's still always in the background where I'm like, I love songs and I want to write songs, but it's just the other stuff, I guess, is taking priority. So it'll come back at some point. I just don't know when. Um, but in terms of using other people's voices, yeah, I mean, it is kind of that thing where it's like, I guess I think of it like an instrument in that way, where it's like negotiating the same kind of like, how can I get this kind of sound that I want out of this instrument and finding that place. Um, and I guess I don't know the voice, like I'm not a singer. I haven't worked a lot with voices, so it's a thing that's a little bit foreign to me, less so now because I've done enough stuff I think that I feel comfortable with it. Excuse me, but it's just something that it's a particular challenge more so than, but like in a nice way, in a fun way, to figure it's like a puzzle or something, maybe is a better word than a challenge, to still find that balance. And I think adding in, language, adding in text, as you tend to do with the voice, brings it into another level that again is like fun, but also it's a puzzle. It's like problem solving of figuring out how to make it work. So yeah, it just kind of depends on the context, I guess, on the piece or on the album of like, and it's the same with every instrument that I choose of just like deciding, okay, I think this will be the right thing, or this instrument's not going to fit in, so I'll save that for another thing. Um, yeah, it's just it really changes from context to context of it, but it's in the same philosophy, I guess, of like trying to find that textural harmonic aspect of it, just like I would with any other instrument.
When you're making a song, I speak to a lot of musicians and they talk because it's so lyric based and word based. They say I'm taking a shower, I'm talking to a friend, and then the word pops up or a phrase pops up into my mind, and I have to write that down or record something. But your music is it's about the instrument and it's about the notes. Um, so it's not your words aren't coming up into your mind, but kind of where does inspiration spark from and where do you find it coming from? And then how do you find the outlet, maybe if you're doing something else, to get that inspiration and kind of set someplace so you could record it later.
That's funny, yeah, because I mean, it's funny to hear other people say that because that is actually like kind of how it happens for me too, except instead of like a line or a lyric or something, it'll be like an idea, a
Mm.
little weird concept. I'll be in the shower or something, and it'll be like, what if I had two notes doing this together? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. And then as soon as I get in the shower, I'm having to write it down. So it's the same kind of thing where like a lot of I think the most interesting ideas, and I think this is probably true for a lot of people. I don't know, it's mysterious. They just come out of nowhere, or they just come to you. Maybe it's sort of like a right brain, left brain thing that like when you're doing something that is occupying, I can't remember which side is which, but like when you're sort of doing something that is a little bit more routine based, it kind of lets the other side be open a little bit. You're not forcing anything, you're just kind of giving it space for ideas to come. So I tend to yeah, get like interesting ideas while I'm driving or brushing my teeth or whatever, doing normal things. And then yeah, I think everybody has a different way of collecting those ideas. I mean, I send myself lots of emails. That's usually the way that I do it. I come up with an idea and I'm like, I gotta email that to myself. I also just with my personal practice as a musician, I'm very like, I write things down a lot. Like when I'm working on something, usually there's at least 6 months to a year or something before I actually start making the music, where I'm writing down ideas or like in Word documents, like writing down ideas and going through different things. So yeah, I do that a lot. But I don't know. I mean, in terms of like specific inspirations, I mean, obviously, like listening to other types of music. I think I can't remember who it was who said it. It might have been like Rilke or somebody who said that like if you want to be a good writer, the best practice is to read other things. And I think that's kind of true probably with other art forms too. But with music, I think like just listening to other types of music is good practice. It like really helps you as a musician. So yeah, I mean, just like listening to other types of music, even if it's not music that's the same as what I'm making, like minimalist types of music, like in a lot of pop music, listening to stuff in headphones, hearing those details of the recording and the production is super interesting. And I might get ideas like, oh, it's cool how they layered these two things and they're kind of moving together. That's interesting. Maybe I can take that concept and turn it into something. Um, yeah, so it again, it just I don't know how it happens, where it comes from, but thankfully it still comes
It's
to
still
me.
coming. It's
Yeah.
still, if you have a 6 months to a year, I want to stop on that point because that is a lot of music then that you have to now. What is your filtering process at the end of this when you're now at the in the studio and ready to record a project? Um, you have many projects. Maybe the filtering process has changed over time, or kind of how has your filtering process gone from having your ideas to then implementing them into your albums?
I mean, the nice thing, like there's a lot of things I think about my practice that have changed, but actually one of the nice things that hasn't really changed is that part of the process is that I've kind of always started bigger, like with a larger idea or like especially with an album, which I would say is like my favorite part of making music is like making albums. I really like working on albums. No surprise because I have like a million of them. But yeah, I like coming up with this sort of bigger idea of like what the feeling of the album's going to be, what kind of music it's going to be, what the vibe of it essentially is going to be. And then sort of again, yeah, like making notes. And this is like while I'm working on another album, let's say, like while I'm actually recording another album, I'm on to mentally the next thing, thinking about those ideas and just like writing it down. And then I think from that point, once I have this sort of larger idea, it just becomes more and more refined, like going through it over and over again and saying like, oh, what if it was like this? Or actually, maybe I can change this and maybe this thing's not going to fit. So I'll save that for another time. Or just bringing in other things. So yeah, it just from the bigger picture, it gets just more and more specific until it gets to the point where, let's say I'm finished with the current album that's gone aside, and then I have the time, like, okay, now I'm going to focus on this and actually start recording. But I think the other thing that's really important that I often, like when I've taught composition that I give as like a bit of advice is I think it's important to know how to pivot and like how to change and be open to that. Because I think a lot of people, and myself included, get stuck in this idea that's like, I really wanted it to be like this. And for some reason, when you actually go to do it, it's just not working or it's not sounding the same. And being able to, not be hard on yourself about that and to be open to like, okay, well, actually, it's going organically in this direction. So I need to follow that and see where that goes. And this other idea, you can always save that for another time. Like it's not that you only get one shot. So yeah, just being able to like listen to what's happening and know how to respond to it, I think is important. So it's always that negotiation, I think, of like having this bigger idea and then being more specific and just kind of seeing where things fall. And then yeah, as you work on it, I think for me anyway, it just gets more and more refined until I'm happy with it. And then I think another good tip that's hard for people is like knowing when to stop as well. People really struggle with that. And I've seen lots of people who have been working on an album for like 10 years.
The
And it's
same
like, what are you doing? Yeah, it's like I could have made like 10 albums in that time. And the thing is, like, again, back to this idea that like you're not going to please everybody. Like, I think by that same token, even things that maybe if it wasn't exactly what you wanted it to be, somebody else is going to hear something new out of it. They're going to get something out of it. So, not that you should be putting out music that you're not happy with, but even if it's not exactly where you thought you wanted it to be, it's okay to still kind of follow it and let it be something else that you feel okay about and then let go of it and go back and start again instead of just getting bogged down with like making this one thing work. If it's not working, it's not working, you
So
know?
true. That's so true. How do you decide when you're done? Do you have like a team with you that says, all right, Sarah, this is it? Or are you really good at like self-discipline? This feels good. This feels good.
Yeah, I think I got really lucky. I have some kind of gift or something where I know when it's done. And again, I've talked about this with a lot of people because people just really struggle with this, and people have asked like, well, how do I know when it's done? Like, how do you know when something's done? And I don't know. I just do, I guess. But for me, a lot of the way of working on it, again, is sort of this back and forth where like I'll work on something and then I'm listening to it to
Mm,
make sure that I like it. And I kind of go through this process where like I'll be listening, and as soon as there's something that I don't like, I kind of go there and I figure it out. I kind of, problem solve backwards. I try to figure out what's going on here, how can I change it? And I just kind of keep going until I'm happy with the whole thing. So I don't know, I think for me it's just kind of an intuitive like, yeah, I feel good about this. This feels done. And I don't know, there's probably some kind of skill that I developed over time of like knowing how to pace things and like have a start and an end that feel good. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard. I really struggle giving advice on that to other people because yeah, for me it's kind of just like I know when it's not done and I know when it's done.
it's natural. It's natural. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't fight, like you said before, you can't fight it. You kind of have to let things go where they need to go. And so,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, including your inner voice on telling you stop, and then you stop.
Yeah.
There was a phrase, there's a concept that I was reading up about that you either have done in your PhD, or maybe it's in your music, or maybe it's in both, that I wanted to hear your thoughts on. It's critical organology.
Okay.
Um, and I found it fascinating once I dug into it and kind of seeing how your music plays into it, but kind of walk us through kind of your understanding of it, and how has your studies kind of informed you about its use case in contemporary music, or maybe you may have dug into it through historic cases. But how has
Mhm.
that informed kind of your music making process, and how you understand specific instruments and how they affect kind of our socio-political, cultural lens?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so for your listeners, if they don't know, organology is not just the study of organs, it's the study of musical instruments, which includes organs, but it's the word for the study of musical instruments. And yeah, I mean, I guess kind of going back to that job that I had, I mean, that was really like eye-opening for me, I think, in like conceptual way of thinking about sound and kind of making sense of it. That's how I got interested in organology is really thinking about, or that's how I discovered that that's what it was like this study of instruments and really understanding the specifics of instruments and what kind of impact they can have. Yeah, and it was the focus of my PhD. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, there's a lot to say about it. Um, I mean, for me, in my music, like I kind of said earlier, it kind of opens this space where um, you can take each instrument in a more nuanced, specific way, the same way that you'd understand, in orchestration terms, like, okay, something that's played on a piano is going to sound different if it's played on a flute or a guitar or whatever. We can understand that. But you can get even more specific and say, like, okay, well, played on a guitar, this thing's going to sound different played on five different guitars. It's going to sound different based on where the microphones are recording it. It's going to sound different based on what space it's in. And just getting really specific about that sort of larger sense of what like we can understand as timbre, of like that moment of how we're hearing things and how things come together like an assembly line almost to create this other thing that we experience. And one of the things that I talk about in the dissertation, I kind of towards the end of it, I go off on this big philosophical rant. But one of the things that I mentioned, that I picked up from a philosopher, Paul Ricoeur, who I talk about a lot in the dissertation, is he talks about the way that timbre, well, he's not talking about timbre specifically. Not a lot of philosophers talk about music, but he's talking about it in terms of like art and the way that we understand aesthetic experience, is that it tends to sometimes get overlooked where it's like, okay, it's something that like looks a certain way or sounds a certain way. But we tend to overlook the fact that it like really changes how we feel about something. When you're listening to something, it's really changing you as a person. It's changing the way that you, after you're done listening to it, you're kind of a different person going back into the real world or the everyday world. And he emphasizes like the sort of ethical responsibility of that, or the sort of ethical power of art in that way, that it's something that changes who you are and how you relate to the world around you. So I think that's really interesting, and I think especially with this kind of music that isn't easy to listen to, that isn't sometimes enjoyable to listen to, that there's something that it does to you when you allow yourself to go there, that it changes something about how you understand things around you and how you understand the relationship with confrontation of things that are uncomfortable. And I think I've noticed that in the last couple of years as something that has been more meaningful in the way that I make music, or more intentional of like creating that kind of space that's not just sort of interesting to listen to, but also like meaningful in that kind of way.
There's a lot to soak in with that when I listen
Yeah.
back. I love that. I love that so much. Okay. Um, I want to talk about, you have a new project coming out. You have a new album. And I feel like a lot of these concepts that we're talking about, I wanted to pull these out because you've done so much in terms of your discography, but also your research and your understanding of sound and resonance and timbre, and now organology. Now I could have kind of umbrellaed that under organology. The new album, The Will of Tongues, love this title, out August 28th. First single, I wrote Follies, but there's a longer
Yeah.
a song title before
Follies
you.
aside, yeah.
I wrote Follies because it felt kind of fun and easy to write down. But I wrote that it was heavenly, unlike anything I've heard from you before. Very choral, mesmerizing, and it drew me in. I listened to it a lot before, specifically before this interview, and because it was like the newest stuff that I haven't listened to before. And the way in the press release so far it's been described as this your most ambitious project yet. And I said, okay, Sarah is a very ambitious artist. Her music is already very expansive. How is this more expansive from that? So I wanted to get your take on what were you doing? How were you approaching this project? It sounds like you have a lot of great collaborators from around the world. And there's there's chamber music, there's choral music, and there's solo composition. So it does almost sound like it's multiple albums in one, the way it can be you've had actually you've had albums with all these actually in one, but sometimes some albums will just be chamber or just be
Yeah.
solo compositions. Talk to me about the music making process and what do you want the Davachi fans? I don't know if you have a fan group name. I'll be a part of it if there's
Yeah.
a name. But I wonder what do you want, you know, the folks that do get it to get out of this project, and how was it making this album?
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. Yeah, I mean, for me, this one feels, I guess the like ambitious part of it for me, just has to do with the length, mostly because like you said, I've had other records that have had a lot of these same elements all put together, and that is like a challenge in itself. I don't want to like underplay that, because it is, just logistically, it's difficult to like all these people, recording, timing, everything. It's a lot of work. And then also creatively, like getting things to balance and sort of fit together is a lot of work. But as I said earlier, like I love making records. It's my favorite type of puzzle to solve. So it's something that I go really deep into, and I really enjoy doing it. But yeah, for this one, part of it, I think, because it is a triple LP, which is longer than anything I've done before. So for me, the part of the challenge was getting it to still feel like a cohesive record. Because obviously with a triple record, it's a lot of time, there's a lot of stuff going on. It can be very easy to like drift off into like, what are we doing here still? Where did, where did we start from? Why are we here? So yeah, that was, I think, the biggest challenge. And one thing I've maybe this sounds weird to say, but I'm Canadian. Um, living in the US, I've learned from Americans that it's not a bad thing to be able to point out things that you're good at. And Americans are very good at doing that. They
Amen.
like to, they have no shame about saying, I'm good at this thing. This is what I do well. And Canadians struggle with with that. Um, and so one thing that I've learned how to do in my music making process is be able to like point to those things that I think I actually am pretty good at doing for whatever reason, and to be able to kind of lean into them, like I said earlier, with like knowing how to end a piece, knowing when it's done. Like I just kind of know how to do it. And so I think one thing that I've noticed that I actually think I'm pretty good at is like being able to work with these really long durations, but still have it feel, at least when I listen to it, I know that it's long, that you're locked in for like 2.5 hours when you're going to listen to the whole record. But somehow when you're done, it doesn't feel like it's been that long that's passed. It doesn't feel like you've been listening to something for 2.5 hours. It kind of does still feel like you've listened to an album. And so, yeah, I think that was one thing early on with this album in particular, which makes it different from earlier albums, was just trying to figure out how to still create that sense of like, this is a cohesive album. It's not just like random things put together. And then, outside of that, like, I think it's the same with every album that I've worked on. Like I said, it's nice that that process hasn't really changed in all the years. That really the way I start is like, there will be sort of one piece that's sort of the initial thing that, outside of the planning, that like where the actual recording or the composition happens, and that becomes sort of the anchor thing for the whole record. And then everything that I'm doing after that is in relation to it. The next piece that I'm doing, I'm saying, okay, I know it's going to be on the same album as this other thing, so it has to fit a certain way. I know that it's going to be at this place in the album, the beginning, the end, whatever. It's going to be paired with this other kind of thing. So these all have to fit in certain ways. So yeah, just doing that on a larger scale, I think was different for this record.
I have two music fan questions, so please
Oh,
bear with
sure.
me.
No,
As a because I'm now very excited. 2.5 hours. Okay, this is
yeah.
gonna be this. We're
Well, like
just
it's 2 hours and 20 minutes,
okay.
so
2 hours and 20. Sorry, no, that's important. And I even noticed that
not
with
get
a lot of.
crazy
But let's not get let's not overdo it now.
here.
For a lot of even Follies, I think it's a 5 minute song, and it goes by really fast.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, when I was listening to your music, um, I think I started listening to your music by studying, and then I would have it in the background, and then I'm like, whoa, what is like that just changed. Like that's something else is going on. And it's like a lot of those songs were like 9, 10 minutes, and it feels like 5, 4 minutes. So it is there is a magic for the listener, there is a magic to what Sarah's doing where she could almost like collapse time, and kind of our how we conceptualize the songs. Maybe because we're kind of put into this other state when we're listening to the music. That's my pure guess. But my two questions was when you were making the Will of Tongues, was there a point, and if there was a point, like, describe the point, but was there a point when you realized, okay, this is going to be a really big project. This is actually going to be like a much different than what I've done before. Or what if there was, when was that time? And if there wasn't, maybe it was in before you started, you came in wanting to do that. Kind of talk to us about that.
Mhm. Yeah, I think with this album, it was actually right from the beginning because the first piece really that I started to do that sort of like initial anchor piece was this piece that's the whole middle LP. It's the two sides of the middle LP. It's a piece called The Rose Dialogues. And I started working on that mm, early 2024, something like that. And like I said, that was like the first piece that I like sat pen to paper, started composing. And I remember kind of working on a demo version of it. I was doing it as part of a residency at this place called MPAC, which is in Troy, New York. Um, and, I remember kind of thinking, because when I'm working on a piece, even if it's not connected to a record yet, I always have it in my mind of like how it could fit on it, like in terms of length and whatever. And with this piece, I guess I was just feeling that like I wanted to do something longer and not have to be restricted by like, oh, it has to be 10 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever so it can fit on an LP. And I remember just thinking like I just want to make a record or a piece that gives itself the time that it needs. And so this version of it that I did, I think initially there might have been a version of it that was like closer to an hour, and there was another version that was more like half an hour. And so I kind of had that space to start working with it. And at that point, I was like, okay, this is just going to be a long piece. So now, if I want this to be on an album, which I do, now I have to get a little bit more specific and say, like, okay, what's the longest I can get away with? Which ended up being like about 45 minutes. I can split it into two parts and then figuring out, okay, where are those two parts gonna kind of be? And so, yeah, at that point, once I kind of knew that it was just going to be a long piece that kind of needed its own like its own LP within the fold, that from the beginning, I was like, well, I guess this is just going to be a triple LP because this whole piece needs its own LP space. And I'm pretty used to now doing like double LPs. I think in those terms a lot. So yeah, this adding it just yeah, it initially I was like, it's just gonna be a long record.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, this is exciting. And my second one is about the title, The Will of Tongues. Um, Pardon me if this was not described already, but if it wasn't, love to hear your thoughts on the title, or if you want us to kind of come up with our own concept on what the Will of Tongues means, kind of how does that instruct the music in terms of its title and how we're supposed to think about the music.
Yeah, well, so I'll say that the title comes from so all of the text that's in the three choral pieces, there's three choral pieces on the record. The text that comes from that is sort of a loose translation. I always say this because I lift a lot of things from like poems and other books and things like that. Not one-to-one stealing necessarily, but I do like take a lot of,
Inspiration.
yeah, exactly. So this is based on, there's this Andre Breton poem called The Spectral Attitudes that I've actually used for titles on other records as well. There's just a lot, there's a lot in it, I guess. But yeah, all the text from this piece, this suite of pieces, is loose translations from that, including the line "The Will of Tongues" is from one of the translations that I came across. And the line that it's in, it's actually in the single that came out, although it's in French in the single, but the English translation is something like "Nothing expresses us beyond death," and I sometimes cried out, "That's how the will of tongues is made." So for me, I don't know. I think again, everybody's free to their own interpretation, and I want people to interpret it however they do, and I want to know how people interpret it. I want to have those conversations. But for me, I don't know. It creates a kind of a feeling of urgency or something to like a almost like a will to life kind of feeling of like I don't know. I'm a bit of a closet recovering goth from my teenage days, and it's still there. But I think about death a lot. In a lot of my work, death is like it's a thing that's real that I think about quite a lot. And I don't know, for me, this one just feels something about the Will of Tongues as like an expression of like saying things or living your life that you have in that way because there's nothing once you're gone, or like even like putting into some kind of articulation something that can be there when you're gone, like that like what art does, I think, to be able to exist through time even after the person who made it is gone. So yeah, for me, that's what it entails, is like this urgency of life, especially the way that the world is now. I mean, everything's horrific. Like
Yes.
that clinging on to like the sacredness and importance of like life is, I think, unfortunately, not respected in the
No.
world.
No,
So
everything feels goth now. Yeah. Because everything feels scary.
yeah.
Um, that's so fascinating. I've read reviews of your music and people speak of your music years ago, and like a lot of people say they get emotional when they're listening to it, or like they get melancholic, or um, and I guess it depends on the album that they were listening to. But I felt this sometimes too. So it's interesting to hear kind of your goth background and this. It's not existential in the traditional sense, but it is this thought of life versus death, and I hear a lot of um concepts from kind of religious texts, or maybe like because a lot of these instruments are used for religious use, but I know that's not the reason you're specifically using it. But there is a lot of these parallels in just how we think about life in like the present tense versus what doesn't happen after what happens, or
Yeah.
after we're alive. So um okay, those conclude I think those conclude my Sarah questions. I have these if ever you're listening questions because we're on the if ever you're listening podcast that I
Oh,
ask
yeah.
all my guests. So thank you so much. I do have one more Sarah question. It's a congrats on an award I saw you won recently, the Silver Lion for music. Um, congrats on winning that. I was like, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Talk to me about, did you expect to win it? What was that experience like? And what does that award mean to you? That's a big deal.
Yeah, it was crazy. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah, last year, it's funny, last year felt a little like weird to me. I don't know, last year was just kind of like a bit of a rotten year and whatever, like a general way. And at the very beginning, I remember I get kind of pensive, I suppose, around the end of the year, beginning of the year. New Year's is kind of a weird, I usually am like pretty in like a slightly depressive state, let's say in like January, where I'm like, what's happening? What is life? What is time? And I remember early in January, when I was kind of feeling this like malaise, whatever, my agent called me and she was like, "So, you've been nominated for this award for the Silver Lion for the Venice Biennale." And I was like, "What?" Like, I can't. It was just such a surprise of like coming out of this feeling of like everything's horrible, life sucks. And then getting this news. And yeah, it was probably sometime towards the middle end of January, I think, when I found out that I was nominated. And when I found out that I actually got it, I remember I was playing a show in Amsterdam at the very end of February. Um, and I had just done my sound check. The venue was right across the street from the Rijksmuseum, which is like their big museum in Amsterdam. So I had like a couple hours before the show, so I went to the Rijksmuseum. And then my agent texted me and she's like, "Hey, do you have time for a quick phone call?" And, she knows that I'm playing a show, obviously. So normally she wouldn't be like, let's do a phone call right before your show. So it's like, this has got to be something to do with this. And I was really trying to like the whole like few weeks or whatever of waiting. I was really managing my expectations because I didn't want to be like, maybe what if I got it, and then find out that I didn't. I was very much like, such an honor to be nominated, but of course, I'm not going to get it. Like, it's great to be nominated, but somebody else is going to get it. And so I like I booted out of the museum right away, ran back to the venue and called her, and she was like, "Yeah, so you got the award." And it was just, I remember just being like so, there was a lot of emotion going on. But I think, one of the things in music is like, and I'd be curious to talk to other people who like or specialize in other art to see if it's a similar kind of situation. But like in music, because everything's so tied to like albums or like moments of doing things. It's like, oh, your album was nominated for this or whatever specific periods of time or getting like ratings and reviews or whatever for certain things that you're doing. It was really affirming in a nice way to know that like it felt like somebody saying like all this stuff you've been doing, maybe if this album didn't shine the way you wanted it to, or this album didn't get the attention that you wanted it to, or whatever, you lost this thing in relation to this album. Um, it was like somebody telling me like you're doing something right.
Mhm.
You know,
Feel
you've been
that.
doing all this stuff and it felt like it was a really meaningful thing for me because it was just broadly about like my practice and my work and all of the things coming together as opposed to like here's this one record that did really well.
Yeah.
It was more like this body of work, this trajectory that you're on, people notice it and care about it. And that was really meaningful to me. So yeah, it was really that was a good day.
I'm
When
glad.
I
Well,
first
well
started.
deserved. Well deserved.
Thank you.
I
Yeah, I really
wanted to say
appreciate it.
that
Thank you.
because I feel like you deserve a lot more awards for everything and the length that you've done your stuff, and it's high quality. Like, not
Thank
to
you.
overpraise, I have a problem with doing that, but because I feel that too when I see artists that I really enjoy, and then I sometimes I know some of them, and then I talk to them, and they're like not doing great. And I was like, well, if you
Uh,
knew what you do for like what you do for the listener,
yeah.
but most artists don't feel that because you guys aren't on tour all the time, so you have to. I'm glad it's like almost like a lifetime achievement award that you got.
Yeah, a little bit. I think
Like
they do the golden lion, which is like actual, like for an older person, lifetime achievement. But this is like, yeah, lifetime achievement for like an early, younger person.
young lifetime.
Yeah, which is also nice because it's true. Like I have been like around for a while, and sometimes like with anything, it starts to feel a bit like, oh, maybe I'm old news to people, and I'm like, people are interested in what's new, and it's just kind of sitting in this weird way. So it was nice to again kind of feel like, oh yeah, you're kind of getting recognition for being still young, but like older, like having done enough to warrant getting an award.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
many more are coming. Many more are coming. I know it. I can feel it.
Sweet. Thank you.
Thank you so much for doing this. So I have four general questions, but I'm very curious actually your take on a lot of these questions. Because of your experience and skill sets and your knowledge of music more generally. The first one is about kind of it's the funnest question. We're on the If Ever You're Listening podcast. I want to know what is on Sarah Davachi's playlist. What are you listening to these days?
Yeah, I mean, I listen to a lot of stuff. Like I said earlier, I think like listening to music is really good practice, like training as a musician. And I also, just listen to music because I like listening to music. Like it's not just for like work purposes.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I listen to a lot of different types of stuff. I mean, I think one thing that always surprises people, I have an NTS show that I've been doing for a long time, that I play a lot of like prog music, a lot of pop music, and so that kind of thing. I think if you want to get a sense of what I listen to, that's a really good place to go through. Um, yeah, and a lot of people are surprised. Like sometimes people come up to me at shows and they're like, you make this kind of music, but you listen to that kind of music. And it's like, well, yeah, like I'm not sitting around listening to like Lamont Young all day. Like, that would be boring.
Yeah.
I do obviously listen to Lamont Young, but yeah, I just listen to, I like stuff. I guess I have a particular affinity for the production aspects of recorded music. So I like listening to things and kind of figuring out how it was recorded and thinking about how the production makes a particular kind of sound. So yeah, there's stuff that like works well for that. But yeah, I listen to all sorts of stuff.
Heck yeah. What is one undervalued part of being a musician that fans or even non-musicians in the music industry don't fully understand?
I don't know if it's what was the word that you used? Overlooked or underrated or
Undervalued.
valued? Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's undervalued. The thing I'm wanting to say is getting the opportunity to travel. I
Mm.
think for me is like the most, it's still like pinch me moment where I'm like, I can't believe I'm getting paid to fly to another country, visit a new country, play a show, do something really fun, like make music for people. That like, and often like when I'm coming home, I'm boarding the flight, sitting on the plane, I'm thinking, I can't believe this is my life. Like, I can't believe I get to do this for a living, to like travel. And I think, definitely, it's something that I don't know if undervalued is the right word for that, because definitely musicians know, I think a lot of musicians know that they're lucky to do that. And I think for non-musicians, maybe it kind of goes the other way where like they probably see it and they're like, oh, it's so glamorous. You get to go everywhere and do all these things. And they don't understand that actually it's like it's actually very hard. It can be very hard on you physically, mentally. You're uprooting your routines, and traveling can be very stressful, and it takes a physical toll, and you're not sleeping properly, you're eating properly, whatever. So there's that part of it that maybe in a way it's almost like people don't understand actually how difficult it is. But really for me, like I really love traveling, and I think it's really important to like go to new places and meet new people and see how people live and just get a broader sense of the world and people. And I think it just makes you like a better person, I think, being able to travel. So yeah, for me, being able to travel and see the world and meet people is like just such a special part of being a musician that not other, visual artists don't really get to do that. I don't know.
Oh, it's
It's nice.
extraordinary. It's extraordinary. I think I saw recently you were in Shenzhen, China.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, that's super
Unbelievable. Yeah.
sick. That's
Yeah,
all.
it was I remember when I booked the flights, I was like, I'm flying to Hong Kong.
Yeah.
I paid to fly to Hong Kong, like, because I flew into Hong Kong, which is the closest airport to Shenzhen. Yeah, and just when I got there, I was like, I'm in China. Like, this is crazy. I would never, why else would I have an opportunity to go to China if I like had a normal job?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah. Heck yeah. I did this work fellowship in China for a
Oh,
year
nice.
many
Okay.
years ago, and I was just like, I'm always a big fan. I'm like, people should go like visit, like just like
Yeah,
go to a city, a random
yeah,
city, and see like how big it is and how like the
yeah,
technology and stuff. So I was really excited when I saw that. Never
yeah,
been to Shenzhen though, so that's like high on the list because it's so
yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, it was cool. I will say the humidity when I was there was like pretty gnarly. It was horrible.
It was probably terrible.
Yeah, and that I was like, I got out of the plane and like even in the airport, I was like, oh my God, what's going on?
Did it like hit you when the doors opened? It's like,
Yeah, and it was like every day it felt like not an exaggeration. It felt like walking into a steam room.
oh my
Like
God.
it was like you walk outside and it's just you're hit with this intense heat and wetness, and it was like crazy.
Did it affect your performance in any way, or how was the
No, the
performance for you?
venue thankfully was like blasted air conditioning. It was perfect inside the venue. But I remember like walking from the hotel to the venue, it was like still a 10-minute walk and like on paper, yeah, it's fine, whatever. But I remember when I was getting ready for the show, and then I was like, oh my God, I have to go out. Like I just took a shower and now I have to walk 10 minutes. I'm gonna be disgusting by the time I get there.
It's funny. Oh
Yeah.
my God. Awesome. Awesome. My third question is about artificial intelligence. It's a relatively new question I've added to these more fun questions. Do you see it in your experience as for the music industry, or maybe for yourself? You can answer it one of two ways. Do you see it more as a collaborator, a tool, or competition when it comes to artistry and making music?
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a lot of different opinions about this. I personally see it as completely evil. I think it's horrible and it really depresses me every day when I like see how just even comparing it to like I don't know, 10 years ago or whatever. Maybe we didn't even have an idea of it 10 years ago, even like 5 years ago,
Hmm.
that it's increased so much and it really scares me and like makes me kind of sad to think like in another 5, 10 years, what is it going to be like? And I think people just don't I don't know. Sometimes it reminds me of that quote from Jurassic Park where he says, like, they were so preoccupied with whether they could that they didn't stop to think whether they should.
Yeah, that's a good quote. That's a good
AI kind of feels, and like people who get really excited by it, I kind of think that I'm like, you're stuck in this, like, it's a novelty and like, what can it do? And you're not really thinking about the implications of it. Um, and I don't know, it just, yeah, it bums me out a lot. I don't know. But I think we are like, I don't think you can change anything by just being like, oh, I don't like it. I don't want to use it or whatever. I think at some point, I mean, I don't use it for anything now, but I think at some point it'll probably get inevitable that we do all have to use it. So maybe there's something to be said for like figuring out how to coexist. But I also, I don't want to see that. I don't want to be a part of that.
I know. Well, it's good to hear that that your 2 hours and 20 minutes will be straight from Sarah Davachi's
Yeah.
mind and your thoughts. Like, I feel like it may be one of the last albums like that of that
But I guess that's
scale.
what I mean about like the urgency of like
Yeah.
human expression. I mean,
Yeah.
like, I don't know. I don't know where we're going,
I
but
don't
it
know
doesn't
either.
look good.
I don't know either. I always defer to people like yourself who are more in tune with the music part of it. I'm like on the journalistic part of it. And
Yeah.
I'm so focused on the person. I'm like obsessed with you and what you do, or what this artist does, or this journalist does,
Yeah.
um, and what your brain does to make this type of sound. I don't know what's going to happen in 5 years. Am I going to be interviewing Suno staff, or like what am I? What are we doing here? But I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, and I hope you continue to make music the way you're making it, because it matters. My last question is about advice. For someone maybe in your place when you started, maybe because there was that first year you said where you were making kind of that electroacoustic music, plus you were you were getting your minor in music, but your bachelor's was in philosophy. Talk to maybe somebody in that first year. Maybe they're in school, they're starting to make music. It's different than anything they're hearing, but they like it and it's making sense to them. And they're not using AI, or maybe they are using AI. Who knows? Let's leave AI out of this question.
Yeah.
Making music authentic to themselves. What
Yeah.
advice would you give somebody um, in your shoes, still in their first year, who's interested in music, but kind of doesn't know where to go from there?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is a tricky, like there's certain things I would say, and then there's certain things that I also feel like I can't say because things have changed so much. And I feel like a lot of the things, I often feel like pretty lucky that I was able to establish myself sort of pre-COVID. I think a lot of things have changed since then, and I don't know how people do it now. I don't know like what the right way to do it. And I think the way that I did it, which was maybe like a bit of this slow build, I don't know that that works anymore. I don't know that people can do that anymore. So I don't know that I can give like career advice necessarily, because I don't know that it would be the best advice now. But one thing I do say to a lot of people that I still have to remind myself of is just to like trust yourself, especially in those early days. and again, I still get it all the time with people like, I don't understand this. I don't think you're doing it the right way. It doesn't make sense. And you're always going to get, especially if you're doing stuff that's like a little different or that isn't in the normal way of doing things, you're going to get people being like, what are you doing? Why are you doing it that way? Do it like this. And if you recognize something in it that is special, if your instinct is like, no, this sounds good. I like this. I get this. Then you need to like hang on to that and kind of follow it through and really like double down on it. I would say triple down, triple LP down, on it. Sorry, that was
That
cringy.
was smooth. No, I thought that was funny. That was funny.
But you know what like you really need to like trust your voice about it until you maybe another cringy millennial thing for me to say, but like if you build it, they will come. It's kind of true. Like I think if you really like if you create it, like people will eventually get it. Maybe not everybody, but you will find people who understand. And if you feel strongly about something and somebody else is just like, I don't like that, I don't get it, they're just probably going to be one of those people who just doesn't get it. It doesn't mean that what you're doing is wrong or isn't valuable, and that you can't do something out of it. So yeah, I just would tell people not to like get pressured into doing something just because other people didn't get it. If I did that, I wouldn't be making music.
Amen. No, that makes total sense. And I think a young listener listening to this, that's actually very sage advice because there's a lot of doubt in the beginning that you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So I love that advice. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah Davachi, thank you so much for coming to the If Ever You're Listening podcast. This has been years in the making in my heart.
Oh,
But recently I decided to reach out. So I'm very grateful that you decided to speak with me, and I'm very glad to that we were able to share this moment and share a lot of your insights. And everybody listen to, not gonna forget the title, The Will of Tongues, out August 28th. All of Sarah's stuff will be in the description below. Thank you again, Sarah. I hope you have a great rest of
yeah.
your day.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. This was really nice.